All right, we are live.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Republic Sunday morning hangout. We have myself, Makisha, Armin, Courtney, Owen, Ray, Regina, and Todd here with us today. We are going to be talking today about religious education, both in the context of religion within the education system, teaching religion, atheists learning about religion, the effects of religion on education, any or all of the above, or anything new that pops up. Welcome to all of you who are watching, and if we have any references to links or anything like that, we will add them to our, sorry, my dog just freaked out. We will add them to our YouTube channel where we post these after we're done. So I wanted to start out by mentioning also that we have, and I'm gonna pull up our Facebook group here, the Facebook group where the team, all of the people who, 100 and some odd people who write and manage everything that goes on behind the scenes and edit and do all of the things that are on Atheist Republic. We have a Facebook group where we all communicate with each other, and we also talk about these topics. And so there were a couple of pretty strong differing opinions on the matter of atheists learning about religion, religion being taught in schools as like a comparative religions class or things like that. And I wanted to try to pull one of the, okay. So since some of these people aren't here, I wanted to start us off by the most recent comment, which is that this person is strongly opposed to the idea of having mandatory courses in religion because it would help perpetuate religion itself. Or that was actually a question. Wouldn't religious education help perpetuate religion itself? And that might be a good question to start us off and then kind of see where that takes us. So if schools, let's just say public schools, and we'll talk about parochial schools and atheists within private schools and things like that as well, but if public schools were to start teaching mandatory comparative religions classes or religious education in the sense that we're going to teach people about religion and all the different religions that we can, do you think that would be problematic, and do you think it would actually help perpetuate religion instead of educating people to sort of make up their own minds about religion? So thoughts about that? Raise a finger, wave, wobble your head, some indicator that you have something to say so that I can call you out. Because we had some people who thought that that's how you get people actually away from religion, is by showing them how religions are so similar and things like that. I see that Courtney unmuted herself, so I'm assuming she has something to say.
I do. And I struggled with this myself as a parent before about teaching religion. But I've actually come to the conclusion that teaching kids about religion and all religions is actually beneficial. Because the more the kids know that's out there, the more they're going to ask questions. And that's like the biggest, for me, that was the biggest thing of becoming an atheist whenever I found out that there was other religions other than Christianity and Judaism that were out there, because I had no idea. So I think that expanding their mind will allow them to ask questions, and it will actually focus them on how to ask questions and how to learn.
Anybody else? I think that seems to be kind of a common idea from people who think that that's a good idea. Regina.
Yeah, I'm kind of on her wavelength, but I don't know how they would do it without controversy, because I do, like with my kids, I don't let them go to any religious anything, but I try and at least expose them a little bit just logically to religion. So I don't know how they could do that without it turning into a big political fight.
Anybody else on that? The logistics. Armin, does that help? Is that popping sound gone if I use just my computer mic instead of my headset?
I think that's just me because nobody else seems to be hearing it, but I don't know.
But if it's the same sound that got recorded last time, that's strange.
No, it's a different sound, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I had somebody's hearing something, and I just wanted to make sure that the sound was clear. Okay, so logistically, that might be something that we can talk about the logistics of next. Does anybody else have any ideas about or thoughts about that? Because that logistics part, I think, is tricky. Armin, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a country that has so many different religions, as soon as you start introducing religion, everybody would want their religion to be covered, and it's just going to be so many different religions that you're going to be needing to cover, because if you don't, then that would be discrimination. And I don't know how are you going to cover all that without, if you want to, it's just going to be a bit like too brief of an introduction to be anything like specific and meaningful if you're wanting to cover all of that, but you don't want to also overwhelm people with a lot of content. By the way, I was raised in a country that religious education was mandatory, and I could say that for a lot of kids that actually makes them not like religion, because it wasn't a fun topic. There was a lot of memorization involved, and I think a lot of kids in Iran were raised having to learn the Quran, having to learn Arabic, which is another language in Iran, and also having to learn about Islam and do a lot of exams and stuff about it. So they ended up like not liking this and not liking Islam because of that experience. So that's another thing to think about.
Anybody else? Todd, did you? There we go. Todd, go ahead.
I think logistically, that's where it would present the most problem for reasons that Armin alluded to. If you allow it in the classroom, then you're gonna have to deal with what the course material itself is comprised of, what sort of which groups are going to be represented, how much time you're going to give each group, and then which particular beliefs you're going to teach that say this group believes this. And within any group, because no religion is monolithic, you're going to have different people saying, well, that's not what I believe, and I identify with this group. You're going to have students that are sitting there going, well, that's not what they teach in my church, so this is not. And then they're going to go home and say that this class is misrepresenting my religion, and it's going to be a huge mess. And that's where the politics of it is where the problem is going to be. I do think, though, that particular comparative religion is something that fascinates me personally, and I think it's a discussion that needs to happen, and I think it's one of those things that needs to take place. But I'm not sure if within a formal classroom or within a formal course, if that's going to be the most productive and most objective and most honest way to approach the material.
Thanks, Todd. Anybody else on that? I wanted to move on also to maybe talking about, because I know we have some people here who probably have experiences with this directly when they were in school or as parents, how religion maybe was brought up in your schooling experience, how, not even in the context of formal education, but how did it come up in school and how did teachers handle it and things like that. So if anybody has any stories about that or experiences, good, bad, or otherwise, that might be a good place to go next. But first, if you have any thoughts about that topic, you can also bring that up. Ray?
All right. So then, since I live in Indonesia, let's see, in Indonesia there are 6 religions, like Hindu, Buddhist, Islam, Christians, Catholic, and then Confucianism. here in Indonesia, religions are so important as a part of our history. So in any kind of school, whether at elementary school, junior high school, senior high school, university, we learn religions. We learn history mixed with religions. Yeah, but when we learn a particular object, like religion, here in Indonesia, the majority rules. Like when the religion subject has come, then the then what will be taught is Islam. The rest of the religions, they have to go out of the classroom and do something else, learn somewhere else. And I think this is because Islam is the majority in Indonesia. So that is what I experienced during my days at schools and at the university. I think that's all about my experience.
So Ray, was this a particular class, like a separate class, or was this just how religion was taught in the context of other classes?
So religion is taught in one class, only one class in one subject, since basically we have lots of class, and each class have different subjects during the same hours. So when one class is studying religion, the other students from that class must leave. The other students who has different beliefs must leave the class and go somewhere else. They can either go to someone else's classroom or go to the library or do something else.
So they're teaching the religion to the people who already believe that religion. That's how it's taught there.
Sometimes yes, but there are some cases in my school in which a Christian student is forced to stay in the classroom during the religion subject. I'm talking about the Islam subject. So like the Christian, my Christian friend, sat down in the classroom bored. Yeah.
That's really fascinating. It's a very interesting way to approach it. How about anybody else? Any other personal experiences with religion being taught? I know in quite a few places, religion is actually, even though the schools are public and technically secular, that religion is still an integral, usually Christianity. But now Armin shared a little bit about his. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that as well at some point. But Courtney, I saw you unmute yourself for a second.
Yeah, if Armin wants to talk, I mean, he can.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to share my experience as a mom when my son was going to a cyber school, which is a public school, but he was learning about world geography, and as they were going to the different countries to learn about, they also brought up the religion that each culture has. Like they learned about Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism. They even learned about paganism because they went back into the medieval times and what people were learning back then. And it wasn't taught like, oh well, here's like a huge breakdown of what everybody believed, but it was mentioned about like just like the basis of the belief as like a historical and cultural aspect. And my son actually learned a lot, and he would actually come to me and ask questions like, well, what is this? If I didn't know, we would both Google it or whatever. So it was like kind of like an expansion. But I kind of understand where Todd was coming from, and even Armin, the logistics of it, because for me as an atheist parent, I would happily explain each religion. But I think Todd was the one that brought up, what if the parents, what if they're Christian and the kid goes home and says, what is Islam? That's not what we believe, and then the parents will go crazy about it. So I totally get that point.
Yeah, and I think there is kind of always, when these sorts of things come up, there's always the issue of, well, parents want to teach their kids about religion, and they should just teach their kids about religion. Why does it have to come to the schools? And I've heard the argument that you can't, we don't say that about a lot. There's a lot of things we don't say that about, and it's come up with sex ed as well. Why don't you just let the parents teach the kids whatever they want about sex and puberty and all the things that kids generally learn in a public school sex ed situation? And I think that point has merit, except that the reality is that we all live interdependently, and your kids are going to influence the future of my kids. And so it's not just, I'm not necessarily comfortable always just saying, well, do whatever you want as a parent, teach them whatever you want. And so I think that as a society, if we determine that something has value for the society, then within the context of a public education system, it should be taught in some way. I tend to be of two minds about the religious education component, because I see the logistical complications and how difficult it could end up being. But that also happens within, and to use it again, the sex ed issue, that also comes up, and that is also problematic in many cases. But I'm not necessarily sure that not teaching it is a good alternative either. I think I saw Todd unmute himself at some point. Go ahead, Todd.
I just stuck my hand up. I was actually typing it out in chat, but what Courtney mentioned, that particular way of bringing it up in the cyber school, I think that would lead to some interesting discussions whenever you see different nations throughout the world, and you see these, this particular region believes this region believes this, and you see those mapped on top of one another. That would lead to some interesting discussions about religion developing as it's a cultural development, very much so, and there's not anything transcendent or miraculous about it. And seeing, it took me a while. I've just only recently started to see more of those maps, more of those things mapped on top of one another. And I think those two things, that would be really interesting. As far as my experience with education, I went to a public high school, and it was one of those things where it was just kind of part of the furniture, and everybody just sort of brought it in with them. Everybody brought in whatever beliefs that they had been taught at home, and that's where it came up. We had debate classes where every now and then the existence of God or some sort of moral issue would come up, and it would be they did a good job of they would allow they would only allow things that you could substantiate, and it was difficult. You could tell it was very difficult for a lot of people to set those aside, because I can't find any substantiation for this outside of my holy book, and that's perfectly fine for personal things, but as far as convincing someone else, it's not going to be adequate. And so they did a good job laying the groundwork for that. And as far as my undergrad and graduate work, that was in private Christian schools. My undergrad was at a local private college, and my graduate work was at a fairly well-known evangelical school, and I attended there as an atheist. And I was, an atheist the entire time I was there. And I have to say, to me, it comes down to then there's several issues across the country, but particularly in my region in the South, different schools are coming up with this. They operate on a statement of faith. In Catholic schools, you have the catechisms where you have this formally handed down thing, but within the Protestant schools, you have these statements of faith, these things that you have to state that you believe in order to teach at that institution. I will say this, that the graduate work that I did, they had a statement of faith as well, and I was very honest and upfront in saying I don't believe this. Part of their thing is you don't have to believe any of this in order to attend here, and it was part of every class. it was just part of the, the reason we can do science is because of religion, because of the Bible, because of, and all this. You have all these other things that are now coming up in apologetic debates. And I didn't buy it. But one of the things was you had to be able to tell these things from an evangelical perspective, or the way they called it, a Christian worldview, which was, it was good to know. It was good to stay in touch with that, because that enabled me to just kind of be able to put that hat back on and talk to people that are in that mindset. But I was always, honest in saying, I don't believe this. I don't believe this has any merit to it, and here's why I don't. And I have to say, in as far as academic honesty, I was never downgraded. None of my comments were ever censored in any of the forums or discussions that we did, and they treated it very, very fairly. And my classmates, who were almost all evangelical Christians, were receptive to that, to the way that was presented. So it's always there, and I think it's a restriction on it restricts you on how you can really apply the findings and the learning that you get. But it can be handled in a way that's civil and promotes academically honest inquiry. Well, that's kind of been my experience with it.
Thanks, Todd. When you were talking about that, it made me wonder something, or kind of coalesce something in my thinking about this, is that I wonder if by putting together a formal way of teaching religion, that we would be able to, maybe by keeping it in a container, we would be able to kind of avoid some of the way that religion can sneak into other classes because of the teacher, or because different schools doing different things. Now, obviously, we're talking very broad. My perspective is American and Canadian, so school systems are run differently in all kinds of places for all different kinds of reasons. But from that perspective, I wonder, or just from a general perspective, I wonder if by instituting some rules and some boundaries and saying, this is a comparative religions class, this is how we're going to teach it, each religion is going to get a certain amount of time, and we're going to hit them all, and and that's how it's going to be done. I wonder if that would maybe protect sort of the other classes from having that influence. Because now in a university, when you're talking about a Christian university, which I went to a Christian university for a while as well, and that whole Christian worldview thing that's a whole other kettle of fish. But I do wonder if it would maybe actually help stop some of that a little bit in the public education system. But I don't know, because I haven't really seen it done. I'd be interested to hear if anybody has seen it done well or experienced it. Armin, I'd love to hear some more of your experiences.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, like, just making any course, not just religion, mandatory, you have to have like very good evidence that this is something that everybody is going to need. And I think it's hard to do that. I understand that religious education has a lot of benefits, but so does so many other topics. I mean, people could be like, world history should be mandatory, and like, I don't know, this should be mandatory, that should be mandatory. And for all of these topics, I think you could make a case that why they're valuable. But I think other than science and mathematics and stuff like that, it's hard for these things you could show that why everybody needs that. But for other topics, I think you're gonna find it more challenging. I'm not saying that there is no value in religious education. I just think I think that should be the decision. Maybe as an option, like they could have electives where kids could choose like a history of world religion, or like, I don't know, comparative religious if they want to. And I think this is a course that would be much better treated in a university setting than in an elementary school setting. But I think that one thing I would rather see, maybe discussed or as a mandatory course instead of religious education would be like logical fallacies, logic, and so, that would be something that it would be an easier case to make for why it will always be beneficial for everybody. But again, I'm not trying to say that religious education is not valuable, but I'm just saying that how valuable is what the case that we need to make, because for anything that you introduce, for any subject that you introduce as mandatory, you have to take something out because there's limited time that you have with every kid in school. So it's not just the benefit of a course that you need to consider, but it's also the opportunity cost of a course that you introduce in school.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, hi guys.
Yeah, Andrew.
Hi, Makisha.
Hey.
Guys, I'm just going to read off a couple of comments from a thread we had in the AR private group, which was pretty much on this topic, and I think one or two kind of speak to exactly what it is you guys were talking about right now, and namely this is about how this is addressed in the UK, which I wasn't familiar with, but I'll just get right to reading the comments. So I'm reading a comment right now. It's what some people don't realize is that religion can be taught objectively in schools. In the UK, religious education in most state schools is done so comparatively. No one is indoctrinated into a particular faith. The students are given overviews of the religion being studied without going into minute details. And then this is another comment. Sociological study of religion is what is now taught in British schools, and it's a really useful subject. We also look at ethics and explore how we come to moral conclusions, and if religious attitudes are the same as secular ethics or not. It's more of an awareness class than indoctrination. There are a few more comments, but I think those two speak directly to what you guys were discussing right now.
Thanks, Andrew. Sorry, I was trying to find a resource. I was listening though. We did have some good thoughts on that, and I was really interested to hear some people have really strong feelings about it, and I'm always interested as to what the background of that is. It seems to be that when people have good experiences with learning about something, they think that it's a good thing for everybody to learn, and then conversely, when they have bad experiences, they don't think it should be taught. And I appreciate what Armin said, and I think that it's an important point to keep in mind that we have to be selective about what we teach, and obviously we have to look at the number of hours in the day, and we have to say, is this how we want to be using our time? And I think maybe that's the whole point, is that's the conversation we need to have. What is the benefit to teaching? Is the benefit high enough to people learning religion, or learning about religions? What age group are we going to be teaching this at? All of those kinds of things. I'm wondering if anybody here has any. I'm so disappointed that Owen had to leave because he has some experience in this. But I'm really interested to hear if anybody has experience as an atheist in a religious school or in. Todd shared a bit. And that was great, and I liked the point he made about how it can be done respectfully. And actually, most of my experiences within Christian contexts are not caricatures at all. They're very real people who are generally very nice, decent, respectful human beings. So I share that as well. But I'm wondering if is anybody here who's had that experience of being an atheist or being a skeptic, maybe in your family or as a child, and going into a parochial school situation, Catholic school or school where religion, not comparative religions are taught, but actually like a single religion. Does anybody have that experience? No. Well,
I mean, I was an atheist when I was in university in Tehran, and even in university, religion in Iran is a mandatory subject from elementary school to high school and in university. And also in high school, Arabic, at first it's just religion that's a mandatory subject, but then in high school, Arabic also becomes a mandatory subject because it's the language where the Quran is written. So I don't know if that counts, but that was and by the late in my high school years, I was and in university I was already an atheist, and I remember actually challenging my religious teachers a couple of times. I got kicked out of the classroom one time for asking a question, um, but I don't know if that's what you had in mind when you asked that, because that's a very different experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, any of those things. I think it's always interesting to hear what those experiences are, because I think they help us shape our opinions about maybe the decisions we make as far as how these things are taught, and the decisions we make about the future. So I'd love to hear some of that, and then when you're done, Courtney is going to share a story about her son.
I just had a meeting with some ex-Muslims last night on Hangout, and it was very interesting to me how so many ex-Muslims know about Islam in much greater detail than what they were even taught in school. Like, at least the ones that I talked to. Like, there's so many hadiths and like different teachings in the Islam, or different ways people look at it, that even though like Islam is covered in school, I feel like when I talk to a lot of ex-Muslims, the knowledge they have about Islam is actually much more than what they even been taught in school. So I think I think people being interested in learning about religion has more to do with how much their lives are influenced by it than if it's a subject in school or not. So I think like if the interest is there, people are gonna go and just hunt for that information themselves without that being mandatory or not. So that's just what I think.
Courtney, I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to quickly add something on to Armin's point. Basically, being raised religious, you don't know to ask questions, and your religion is basically, I mean, it's your life. Like, you don't think of asking questions because, it's just like breathing air. Like, that's just what God is. It's just there. It's never not been there. So, to go look and ask questions about the religion. Oh, well, you think that you're taught it all. You know what I mean? Even if you're only taught 1% of what's in the actual Bible or the Quran or whatever you're learning. So I just wanted to kind of add that point. But as far as my son, he just went back to a brick and mortar public school this year for 8th grade. And the first couple of weeks, it was definitely rough. His American cultures teacher, it was like the first 2 weeks, they were discussing the new timing system, like that they want to go to between BC and AD to BCE and CE, so before Common Era and Common Era versus before Christ and whatnot. And the teacher had made a comment to the entire class that people just want to take religion out of everything. And my son came home and he was like appalled, because he was like, why did she have to bring that up? I don't want to know that. Like, I don't want to know her personal opinion. And then a couple weeks later, she had asked the class, well, what religion are you? And my son's an atheist, and that's what he told her. And she told everybody that she's a Catholic. So it was kind of like he was just saying that I think he's like I think there's only 2 other atheists in this school. But at least he has, something. But he was just sitting there in that class like, this is American culture. Like, this should not be taught. And, we came home, he talked about it, and, I said, just keep an eye on it, because if it keeps happening, then, we'll definitely go a little bit further with this. But even in a public school, these teachers can get to kids, saying, oh, well, I'm a Catholic, and they're coming from a status of they're a teacher, so kids look up to them. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's just kind of like your boss is telling a secretary, like hitting on her or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's a position of authority. These kids look up to them. So, I don't know, just found it a little bit odd.
I've had those experiences as well, and before my thought flies up my brain, I wanted to speak to the issue of you made a really good point, Courtney, about when you grow up in a religion, not only are you not encouraged to ask questions, you are discouraged from asking questions, and you're told that every other belief is wrong and bad and just stay away. And in certain parts of Christianity in particular, it's almost like a germophobic thing. Like if you spend time with people who have other beliefs, or you learn about those things, it's going to invade your brain and like push God out or something, and it's going to put doubts in your head, and then they layer on all these levels of fear about what's going to happen if you read books about religion, if you learn about religion, if you talk to people of other religions. So the one benefit, now all that to say, a benefit of teaching comparative religion in public school is that those kids might have a shot at actually thinking and being exposed to these things, whereas, where they might not otherwise have that opportunity at all. And so that is something that gives me pause, because I just know that that's a reality for so many religious kids, just having no opportunity or being just so afraid of that. My kids have also had quite a few experiences with religion in a similar way, Courtney, that and this is what gives me pause about saying that it's not important enough. And I know that's not necessarily what Armin was saying, but that's what makes me think that maybe it is important is that when there's a dominant religious belief represented by the students, and especially by the teacher, by the person of power in these kids' lives, it can take over anyway. Like it dominates the classroom landscape in these conversations, especially when the kids are younger, because so many of these kids it's so difficult to be the only one, who doesn't believe, or, oh, hi, kitty, and the conversations can get really weird. She's going to be distracting. Go away. Like that's happened in some of my kids' classes too, where somebody has maybe said something that they've done, maybe celebrated a religious holiday or something, and then the teacher tries to be very inclusive and says, "Oh, what are your religions? What do you all believe and practice?" And then the one atheist kid, who my kid seems to always be the one who's like, "I like science," and then it's like it's this passive sort of peer pressure where even if the kids aren't necessarily saying you're bad or you're wrong or whatever, which she gets that too, and for a kid in grade 4, that's not always so fun. Fortunately, she doesn't care, but it can be a passive message that's being sent by knowing that everybody else in the class is a particular religion, and then the teacher says, "Oh, I'm Catholic," or whatever, and then all of a sudden, the atheist kid knows that she's the odd one out. So anyway, that happens regardless of whether or not we teach it, which makes me wonder if we teach it in a more, again, like I said before, like in a container and have rules about it, maybe it would help some of that. But I'm not sure it really would. But as from a parental perspective, I think I would prefer that particular context. Any thoughts on that, or any stray thoughts floating around from anyone? Any other experiences that people would like to share? We have Euclid's been on off and on, and we've kind of been muting because there's been some background noise, but I wanted to provide an opportunity if you wanted to chime in or not. Okay, I am going to ask, what other question was I going to ask? Oh, resources for teaching yourself or kids about religion. Anybody have any good books, websites? If I say, hey, my kid's really interested in religions and wants to know why people believe what they believe and what the sort of foundational tenets of certain religions are. Any ideas? Or where do you go yourself? Nothing? That's amazing. Courtney.
Yeah, I know that David McAfee just wrote a book called The Belief Book for kids, where he breaks down all the different religions, for kids. For me in particular, I'm an atheist, but I write, basically for that. But I think that just from what I've seen of his book, at least he wants to introduce kids to the different religions in an educational way, and not, obviously not, pushing any one religion. He just wants kids to have a foundation for that. So I would definitely recommend that book.
I would actually want to recommend that book too, because it's such a great book, because it doesn't, it teaches, first of all, it's not like an atheist book. It's not anti-religion. It teaches kids about religion, and it's also very interactive. It asks kids, for example, to come up with their own stories, creation stories, and it teaches kids that so many different people believe in different things, and makes them think, why would they come up with these like stories. It's a very interesting book. It's fun. It's not, I mean, as an adult you would enjoy it as well. It makes it's not just a one-way communication. It doesn't just teach the kid what the religion is about. It makes them actually think about it, and because it's interactive, it actually makes them consider some of the things that the book is teaching. It's a wonderful book, and I think like it's a book that both atheist and religious parents would be comfortable buying for their kids. So I think it's a really good resource for any parents that wants to teach their kids about religion.
I'm glad that Courtney brought that up, because that's the one I couldn't remember. And I'm sorry, my cat is looking really creepy right now over my shoulder, and it's very distracting. She was just staring into the monitor. And anyway, so yeah, that's the one I was thinking of and couldn't remember, because I don't know, Courtney, if you had brought it up in the group or somebody else, but there's also some really fun illustrations in that one. It's The Belief Book by David McAfee and illustrated by Chuck Harrison. And we can post a link in our YouTube as well. And Owen's back. We have some time, I think. Owen, if you have a few minutes, I would really like to hear your thoughts on this subject and your experiences before we run out of time. First, does anybody else have any other resources that they wanted to share? Okay, so I think I'm sure there's a lot more, but specifically about religious education or teaching about religions, but I can't think of any off the top of my head, so we'll have to provide some links in our YouTube when we post this. So Owen, I would love to hear your thoughts on this and your experiences.
Well, I go to a Catholic school, so yeah, and my religion teacher is crazy, and she says that aliens are devils, and that gays are sinners, like most people do, and oh my God, and she says that fortune tellers are sinners. Says a lot of crazy stuff.
So how do you handle these situations, Owen? You don't strike me as the kind of kid who would just always sit silently, but I know it can be hard to always be the provocateur. So how do you handle this experience as you're going through as an atheist, very obviously intelligent, free-thinking person? How do you handle it?
I don't do anything really. Like, I get angry sometimes, but
do you find that other kids are experiencing the same frustrations, or are you kind of the odd kid out?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I don't think they care as much as me, but there are a lot of other atheists in my class.
Is there ever any opportunity for conversation, or is it very one-directional, just from the teacher to you?
Well, there was one time, but we weren't really like debating anything.
Mm-hmm.
There was one time where she said a lot of crazy stuff. But that was one time. And some other atheists in my class were like starting to debate her, but it wasn't really a debate.
Do you find that the religious component extends outside of just the religion class? Like when you're in a science class, for example, is it also present there?
Not really. No, I don't think it really is.
Oh, well, that's a relief.
Like we learn about well, we don't really learn about it, but like we don't learn about it, but it's taught as fact. It's like considered fact in science. And most years my religion teachers haven't been creationists, but this year she's like a fundamentalist.
And have you always been in Catholic school?
Yes.
Yeah, because your family is Catholic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. God, that is so. I would think that would be so exasperating. Does anybody have any thoughts or advice or words of wisdom? Armin has a fair amount of experience with being in that context, even if it's just university. But
well, I'm actually not the. The thing is that when you are raised in a liberal community, it's not actually the same, because even if you're frustrated, in north of Tehran, most people are pretty liberal and secular. I'm not saying that's the same with all of Iran, but at least in north of Tehran, that's the case. And even if you're frustrated with your government for being too religious or your religious school, the thing is that almost everybody, at least a majority of the people in the class agree with you, so you could like vent out with them, and it's not the same as being isolated. At least when they're not. I'm not saying they're atheists, right? So, but at least you could say how. Your parents also disagree with the government. Your parents also are against it. You understand your frustration with having to go through the religious topics in school, and the way that they were presented, they were really not fun, and not in a fun way or interesting way. So most of the kids were frustrated about it, and their parents could understand why they were frustrated about it, and they just so that understanding and that ability to be able to vent out to people that can relate with you, I think makes a lot of difference and makes it a little bit easier. But if you're the only kid in the school that thinks this is stupid and everybody else thinks this is important and even holy and something that needs to be taken seriously, then I think like you would feel a lot more isolated. I'm just gonna mute. All right. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Owen, for sharing your experience. I wanted that to be presented and out there, because that is definitely a reality for some atheist kids having to go through private school for reasons either because they're atheists but their family isn't, and so their family's sending them through a religious school, or because the parochial schools are the only good alternative that their parents have to maybe a public school system that they don't want to participate in. So those realities definitely exist for a lot of people. I also wanted to give Ray an opportunity. I wanted to hear a little bit of your experience. It doesn't even, at this point, we're at about 10 minutes out. I don't get the sense that people have a lot of burning, passionate things that they want to say about religious education, but a perspective from somebody in Indonesia, I think, is really interesting because it's one we don't often hear. And one of the things that that Ray mentioned in the sidebar is that that he wouldn't even really know what a secular book about religious education would be, and that's that's a perspective we don't often hear. So, Ray, I would really like to hear. We don't have a ton of time, but I would like to hear some of your thoughts from your perspective as somebody in Indonesia, which is a really different place from where most of us are.
Yeah. So in my school, I mean, I'm already graduated from high school, but I felt it. For 12 years, I studied Islam all of the times, even though I've been atheist for a few years ago, and they always taught me how to speak Arab, how to write Arabic, and how to read Quran, how to interpret it. I mean, it's not really a bad thing in itself, so I can actually learn what's actually inside it. But another thing that really gets on my nerve is that I don't get any kind of topics about agnostic, secularism, or atheism. So this kind of sucks, because here in Indonesia, when you have no religion, you're not Indonesian. You've got out here, or you'll get killed right on the spot. So it's like I don't have many friends to trust. So I feel it. I stopped attending my university because of my current status. And I think that's all I can tell you about the religion education here in Indonesia.
I think, thank you for sharing that, Ray. I think that, I know from my perspective, it's really important to hear those things. I think that the climate in other places is so different, and so it's easy to get buried. When we talk about religion in the West, sorry about that. When we talk about religion in the West, we're speaking from a position of freedom and a position of relative power. That's a very different conversation than talking about religion in other places. And I think we often forget that, and I don't want that to be buried. I want to make sure that we keep that at the fore when we're talking about these issues. And not to make too light of what Ray was saying, we were joking about how his background is making us all hungry, which is why some of us were giggling earlier, because he has some food pictures back there. So thank you, Ray, for bringing that up and sharing your perspective. It is really important, I think, to continue to hear those stories, because sometimes people aren't even free to share them, and I know you're not completely free to share them either. So thank you for that. Todd had something he wanted to say, and then we'll start wrapping it up.
Hi, I think I'll try to make this a brief point, although I think it could spark numerous discussions on its own. I think one of the problems that we run into with religious education has been the shift in recent years from it being religion to speaking of it as a worldview. And whenever that shift has taken place, then that takes religion out of its traditional place and puts it everywhere, and honestly makes it spider out into all fields. And I've got I've written a little bit on it. I think one of the reasons for that is because whenever you hear the word worldview, what you're really hearing is they say it's just the set of presumptions or presuppositions about how the world works. Well, that touches everything. That touches history. That touches science and all the hard sciences, and as well as the other scientific fields. It touches everything. These fundamental presuppositions you have about the way the world works, and that's how they get their foot in the door in order to introduce their systematic theologies into all these different fields. You know, for instance, this particular field of science can't be true and accurate because it contradicts my my holy book. Well, the holy book really doesn't say anything, you know, it doesn't make any scientific claims per se necessarily, but you know, their systematic theology has interpreted it that way, and since they can't be wrong, science has to be. And so that's what I think. That's one of the things that really, more than anything else, at least from a cultural standpoint, complicates the discussion. Whenever your particular view is being represented, then you're fine. And I've seen it here in some elective courses that people have had, that different schools have had on comparative religion. Whenever another religion is being represented, and it's that religion's time, and they're saying, well, this is what this religion says about this, then parents go, why are you trying to tell my kids what they should believe? It's this whole just gut reaction from a cultural standpoint, and I think the part of the driver for that is there's so much talk and so much emphasis on worldview now, and that's a way to get systematic theology to spider out into all these other things, so that science and religion are no longer seen as overlapping, you know, non-overlapping magisteria or anything like that, but that your religion touches everything, and that if you disagree or if you agree with the scientific findings that contradict your particular religion in one field, well, then you're completely irreligious and you're unfaithful. And I think that adds a lot of undue cultural pressure to the discussion, and it makes things a lot harder to do.
Yeah, I think teaching religion objectively is that's another hurdle. Because even if you're talking about, say, okay, we'll get an atheist to teach about all the religions. Well, that person already also has a built-in bias, you know. So it's not teaching anything objectively. Honestly, I'm not even sure we can say that's fully possible. But that is something I think that is a challenge when you're talking about this issue, is how do we teach objectively? How do we make sure it's fair? How do we, you know, that's why I've always kind of been like, don't let people onto your campus to hand out Bibles unless you're willing to let everybody on, to hand out every book and flyer and pamphlet and magazine and everything that every religion puts out. And everybody's like, well, of course we don't want to do that. Well, that answers your question then. That solves your problem right there. We just don't do it. And I think that tends to be the way schools have handled it. We're just not going to touch it. And like I said, I'm kind of two minds about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Courtney mentioned wanting to hear more about people's experiences kind of outside the West, and I think that would be a really good topic to have for one of our Hangouts. And the only thing I just want to make sure that we have it well planned, that anybody who needs their identity protected, that we have that all squared away, and that also I think it would be really nice to have it be a little bit of a panel where everybody has a certain amount of time to talk about certain things and things like that. So if that's of interest to other people, we'll talk about that in the group, but people can also let us know through just contacting us through the website. We always would like to hear what you all want us to talk about. We have some topics on the calendar, but they're never set in stone. If somebody brings up something that's more timely or more interesting at the time, we're happy to talk about that. You can always contact us through our website, atheistrepublic.com, and let us know what you'd like us to talk about, what's interesting to you. And anybody else have any closing thoughts? We have about 2 minutes before we wrap up. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your participation. Thanks for your stories and your questions and your comments. Thanks to Owen for bringing the topic up and for joining us again after he had to duck out, and for sharing his experiences. Thanks to everybody who participated and everyone who's watching. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you back here next week.